I want to tell about the perils of Pauline of my childhood. Uh, my little friends and I would go and roll rocks down off the bluff. It was maybe 75 feet dropping in elevation, and there were lots of rocks there from uh, volcanic activity in the past. And we would pry those loose and roll them down over the hill, and they'd go clump, 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 boom. Oh, how we loved that. There was a retaining fence down there that was built out of wire that was sort of like goat wire. And when it would hit that fence, it would send a signal and the train would stop. And we kind of enjoyed watching the engineer or the conductor getting out and walking down there and looking to see what had hit their fence, until one day when I came home from school, Mother said there'd been a couple of very serious men at the house there asking questions about rocks coming down off the bluff. And we hadn't confided in Mother we were doing this. It was a little east of the house where she couldn't have seen us doing it. And so she was able to deny everything, but we didn't roll any more rocks down off of the bluff after that. Uh, but I did other things that were dangerous. One of the worst ones, if not the worst, was that I went through a phase of taking 22 shells and putting them in some crumpled up newspaper in the turnaround by our garage, and lighting the paper and then standing back and waiting for the shell to heat up and pop. Well, after doing that a few times, I did this all by myself, by the way, one of them hit me, and I already knew from looking at the residue that the copper casings were ripping when the primer would flame, and one of those pieces of shrapnel caught me in the throat right about here, and embedded itself. I thought I was going to die. I ran in the house, crawled under the sheets, and as I went by the living room, I told my sister to come with me, and she came in, and I told her I'm going to die, and I was pulling the sheets up over my head. Well, a neighbor told us later that when Mother went by their house on the way to the hospital, that the car leaned on two tires when she made the corner. When we got up to the hospital, the doctor seemed quite serious, I remember. They didn't anesthetize me at all, but he, after doing a little probing, said, "Oh, it's not going to be fatal," and got a set of tweezers and pulled it out. Of course, I got severely chastised for that. And you'd think that would have taught me a lesson, but within a month, I decided to throw a 22 shell into the fireplace fire that was going in the living room, and predictably pop, and I heard psst, whack, and that time actually the bullet had flown out and it flew by my ear, didn't touch me, and for some reason I decided, well, maybe that's enough of that. But another thing that I used to do is climb up on the tree that was uh, uh, south of our house, up on a little hill. There was a big fir tree with long, long branches hanging out near the ground, and my sister and I and a couple of friends would go up there and climb around on the rocks and grab the branch and I'd pull myself up like a monkey. Well, the small branch that I was holding on to broke, and I fell on my back on the rock and split my scalp open. And it was on toward dusk. And at first, my sister and our friends didn't know exactly what was happening with all those little trickles going down my face, and they laughed hilariously at first. Well, then we went in the house, and oh my goodness, it was a big ki-yi. And same thing happened playing softball. I got too close to the batter and got hit with a bat. Oh, I've got a scar. I don't remember which eyebrow, but I've got a scar over my eyebrow where I think that time they had to do stitches. Then there was our rock wall, and I used to climb on that rock wall and try to catch lizards, which have beautiful blue bellies, and they would hop up and down in the sun. We call them the blue racers. What did we call them? Anyway, I'd catch these little lizards. I learned that if you grab a lizard by the tail, when it fights to get away, its tail, its survival heredity, the tail will break off in your fingers. So you don't grab them by the tail, you got to get them by the body. And I would never kill them. I just hold on to them a little while and then let them go. But climbing up on that rock wall was a lot of fun for me, and it was up over the river. It was beautiful there, but I was a daredevil, and I fell off the wall, and it was probably a 6-foot drop or something, and I don't think I really totally, I didn't have a displaced fracture, but I did break my forearm. And so they took me up to the doctor and they put a cast on, and I wore that cast for a few weeks. And finally it was itching so bad I could hardly stand it. They took me back up and he took the cast off and sent me home. I got home, I climbed up. I was so happy. Get rid of that cast. I climbed up on the rock wall immediately and fell off again, put me back in the car and took me back up, put another cast on. People used to be very frightened of that bluff and say, how can you? There's no wall there, there's no railing. But we thought nothing of it, and I'd climb down over the face of the bluff, down to the railroad track and back up. We had a neighbor who was no help, an older guy, but he encouraged us to do that too, believe it or not. Nobody ever fell off that bluff. But the other thing, maybe the most dangerous thing I did during that period, was that my dad loaded his own shells, and this was a very happy part of his hobby. He would weigh out in a little balance scale the powder, and then he'd pour it through a funnel into the empty cartridges, and then he had a tool that he could insert the bullet, and of course he also had to insert the primer. And I would go up there and watch him do it. It was fascinating. But I was also very angry. My father was mad at me all the time for all kinds of various minor infractions. So I think that may have had something to do with the day that I got a couple of his shells and bullets and powder, and I did some reloading myself. And after I got the powder in the casing and put the bullet in, I did something that wasn't any part of what I saw him doing, but it seemed to me the thing to do. I got a hammer and I started hammering on the bullet, and then eventually the casing kind of crumpled and collapsed, and I was driving it down toward the base, and I was told later if I had gotten it all the way down there, it would have ignited the primer and the whole thing would have blown up in my face. But luckily that didn't happen. Dad was not very pleased when he discovered I was doing that, but there was no explosion. There were other things I did that were dangerous. I had my favorite fir tree that I would climb up higher and higher. I think that was fairly safe because I was very good at holding on to the limbs, unlike the limb I fell from down low into the rocks that I mentioned earlier. But there were just a lot of things that I did when I was a child that were pretty dangerous, and some of them caused me some injuries.